Welcome to Second Table, where we discuss spirituality, philosophy, and psychology. I'm your host, Winston Janis. Welcome back, everyone, to the Second Table podcast. Thanks for listening. So we are entering a brand new season of the Second Table podcast. Sorry for the long hiatus where we took a long break from recording. I moved from Boston to Minnesota in order to start a position as an associate pastor of a church out, Peace Church, out in Rochester, Minnesota. And it's been a big transition, a lot going on to deal with, new adjustments, dealing with the global pandemic and all that. And but I've been very excited and eager to get back into recording. We got a lot of good guests lined up for this season.
And some not so good.
So, some return guests, as we're going to find out. I've been really eager to get back into recording and kind of continuing on what we started with this podcast, and got a lot of good content I'm excited about sharing with you guys. So, it's just been a crazy few months where it's been hard to find the time to do all of this, but we are beginning again here now, starting in Rochester, Minnesota. And I'm here today once again with Morgan Caraway, my good friend who was, we did 2 episodes in season 1. So you may already know Morgan. And I'm really excited for us to be talking again tonight. Thanks, Morgan, for being here.
I'm honored to be here, sir.
Yeah, man. So we've actually been talking for quite a bit already, just kind of thinking about what direction can we go in with tonight's discussion. And I think it sounds like we came to the conclusion that although we always have a lot of interesting insights and interesting conversations together, that's why I always love talking with you so much, that one of the things that might be really worth sharing with other people is this idea that we're going through a lot of political turmoil right now in our country. And it's a really difficult moment for all of us collectively. And we're wondering, how in the world might we be able to overcome this divide? It's a scary situation we're in, because it feels almost inevitable that there's almost nothing we can do to stop the conflict that is occurring right now. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I was a little interested in exploring with you. You know, I was as you know, I'm interested in the work that Peter Rollins does. And I was recently listening to him on a podcast talking about how when you have so many millions and millions and millions of people subscribing to a certain way of thinking and supporting a certain candidate in politics, that there's something real going on there, something that needs to be heard and listened to. Mm-hmm. And so we have this kind of division that's existing where the left has a lot of really good points and good arguments and good justification for what they believe and think and feel. And then those on the right that they're often demonized. And how can we not just say, I think you and I are kind of in the camp where we might say like, a lot of the people that are extreme right wing are like fascists and crazy and those kind of things. And to a large extent, I think that's true. But how can we get beyond that and not just kind of...
Well, not demonize it sounds like the word you're looking for, maybe.
Right.
Because I feel demonizing anyone is going to lead to misunderstandings, and it's going to probably ultimately lead to bloodshed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
If you look at what the Nazis did, they demonized the Jews. Once you demonize somebody, you can do anything to them, any horrible thing with a clear conscience, because they are not like you. They are different. They are fundamentally different from you. So once again, I agree with you. We need to be careful not to demonize our relatives and our friends and our countrymen and women on the right.
Right. It's like we have to somehow, as difficult as it might be, to see each other, no matter our political affiliation, as human beings.
Exactly.
And to somehow find a way to sit down together even and say, okay, there's 74 million of you, right? It's like, if this was just a small fringe group and say, oh, there's like 50 people out there who kind of believe this, we'll say, well, we don't need to take them seriously, right? But when there's 74 million people or whatever the number is that sort of feel a certain way, that's too great a number to just overcome and write off. It's like, I understand we need to stand for our principles and stand up for what we believe is right. And at the same time, we need to find a way to hear one another, to listen to one another and see figure out what is going on beneath the surface of this. And and not just say, well, screw you, you're just in the wrong. I mean, I definitely think there's a point in time where we need to stand up and say, like, this is not okay. What is happening is not okay. The insurrection, I'll say, on the attack on the Capitol was not okay.
That was not okay.
It was not okay for so many reasons.
Regardless if you identify as, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, both of those groups were in danger. Republican lawmakers and Democratic lawmakers were in danger. Yeah. So, it was a danger to people on, quote, both sides. But I think one of the dangerous ideas that comes up often in politics is the idea of sides. The idea one side against another side. Because I feel like if we're able to go far enough, if we're able to be honest enough with ourselves, we're going to realize that ultimately every human being wants to take care of their family, wants to have friendships, wants to have connections, wants to have love. Every human being, regardless of what they identify with politically. So, yeah, once again, I feel like we have to be careful not to create an other, those who are fundamentally vastly different than us, who are nothing like us.
Right. And it's really hard because, it is hard. We want to preach love.
We're being sold polarized politics all the time these days.
Right. Yeah, it's social media kind of just says, oh, you liked some liberal stuff? Here's some more liberal stuff. Oh, you liked some conservative stuff?
We're in echo chambers.
Exactly.
Right. Everybody's in an echo chamber.
Right. Nobody's...
And, we had discussed talking about the social dilemma before, but they talk about how these algorithms, these AIs, simply serve up what will keep your eyes on the screen. Mm-hmm. And really, probably most of us have found the most riveting thing is conflict.
Right.
So these AIs trying to get eyes on the screen, trying to get advertising money, are serving us up conflict again and again.
Right.
Creating a strife without even intending to, or without even having a knowledge of what those eyes are on the screen for.
Yeah, it's... technology has a huge role to play in all of this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And it's a scary reality we have to deal with, that I feel like technology, for all its benefits, has actually amplified all of the division that we're experiencing right now.
Exactly.
So,
you could almost say created it, artificially created a lot of it.
Yeah, it's right. It's bringing out the worst in us. It's like, I do think that we have to find a way to find like a center together.
Another thing Mary and I were talking about is when you just read someone's words, you're not seeing their facial expression. You're not seeing them as a human being. You're just seeing this abstraction of their ideas. So, words can be especially divisive when that's all you're experiencing of someone. They're not physically in your presence, a living, breathing human being. In social media, we often just have words being shared, which is pure thoughts, pure intellect, and can often lead to the feeling of division even more.
Right, which leads me to believe that I think there needs to be a movement of some kind, a space that we need to create, as difficult as it might be. People hate each other right now. The left hates the right hates the left. To
a lot of demonizing going on.
Yeah, and I get it. I feel like I stand on one side of that, but I feel as though we have to find a way. Like speaking as a pastor, it's like Jesus sat down at the table with people that were perceived as unclean, as the enemy, as the people who were in the wrong. And Jesus sat down with those people in fellowship in order to try to build relationship, to, get past those things. And so how can we sit down together at the table in order to have dialogue, to have reconciliation of some kind? It's like, I don't know. It's really tough because I also even though I'm saying all this, I'm like, there's some things that once again, I feel like have crossed the line and we have to just say no, like this is not acceptable. We're not like people have pointed out, I think as I've looked online, like, oh, everyone's saying it's a time for healing. Well, no, like the prerequisite to healing is acknowledging the injustice that has happened. And so I agree with that too. But I don't know. It's really difficult to think how can we sort of have a process that we can work through that's not violent, in which we can come to understand each other better.
To me, Jesus, well, at least, the teachings attributed to Jesus, said one of the most radical things ever put on paper: love your enemy. Love your enemies as yourself. Am I getting that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or love your neighbor as yourself, but love your enemies, right? Love your enemies. If you can live that, then I don't know. You can't really have much of a sense of division if you love somebody by default, if you're living it. There can't be a sense of division there. It's like, I love you. I may consider you an enemy at this moment, but I love you. So that's probably too big of an order for most of us. We do sort of live in the world of an idea of us and them, one side versus the other, light and dark, good and bad, etc. All these ideas. So, most of us probably don't have it quite that easy or can't do what Jesus was asking directly. So I think, the important thing is to just recognize people come from different backgrounds. People are raised in different families. Just think about how much of a difference that makes in our life experience.
Right.
One person is raised by somebody with conservative values. Another person is raised by someone with liberal values. The two are kind of on different pages, generally, in the way they look at the world. So I just think we have to get down to the roots, which is we all are raised by someone with certain ideas, and we all ultimately want the same things. To me, and I was telling you this earlier, I don't think the right is afraid of socialism. That word is often brought up in the right-wing media and demonized. But nobody doesn't want their grandma to get a Social Security check. Nobody hates roads or bridges or fire departments or libraries, right?
Mm.
So what the right wing, I think, is actually afraid of is totalitarianism, of someone not letting them be in control of their own lives, which is actually what the left is afraid of as well. I think most people are afraid of the same thing: someone taking away their control of their life.
Which is ironic, because there's like a savior figure, right? That the right kind of is largely putting their trust and faith in, and absolute faith in.
Right. It's interesting, but you see some, the coup attempt, the insurrection. That was an attempt to overthrow the government by people who are afraid of someone overthrowing their government. So fear often makes us create what we are afraid of. Because of their fear, they were creating, or, if they were able to overthrow the government, they would create a tyranny or a totalitarian situation if they had succeeded, which is exactly what they're afraid of. But that they would have created that for a lot of people.
Right.
So it's weird, I guess we're dealing with very primal things, these feelings that people have, these fears. It's not always logical. It isn't always well thought out, is it?
No.
So we're dealing with very primal, deep set feelings. And, I like the idea that we can kind of reason our way through it. But, I think, as you say, we have to figure out how to reconnect as human beings, right, and to recognize each other as human beings.
Well, once again, I think actually it's as counterintuitive as it might be. I think it's about finding some common ground. So right. What is common ground between liberals and conservatives? So a big thing with conservatives is trying to return to a previous point in history, which is idealized as right. having been better than right. today, whereas liberals are often trying to think about the future and progress and let's change. And so, in a way, it almost seems as though this kind of situation that we're in is inevitable, in that our society is changing at an incredibly rapid pace compared with all previous generations in history. The advances in scientific understanding and medical technology and social media and all that. Previous generations didn't deal with this kind of massive change, and all of a sudden the
change is incredible.
Right.
Like you said, just the technology alone, the ability to share information and disinformation.
Right.
Let's be very clear about that. Any system that can be used to share information, whether it's the printing press or whether it is, the internet and a smartphone, can be used to share disinformation.
Right.
And as they pointed out in The Social Dilemma, disinformation and misinformation travel 6 times faster than information does.
Right. So we're not really, we don't fully have the sort of capacity or appreciation or understanding of how to deal with these new technologies and how they're impacting our lives. And so we're trying to cope. We're trying to cope with all of this massive, rapid change. And so there's a resistance to that, to saying, so I feel like on the conservative side, it's all of a sudden all of these kind of, okay, we have to understand gender fluidity and all this kind of social, not like things that are just not recognized in sort of the culture of the past, the society of the past. And so, people on the conservative side of the spectrum are like, this is too much change all at once. And it's frightening. It's disorienting for them.
Right. And that's understandable. I think all of us can relate to that. I mean, we all experience it. Growing up as a child, the phone was a thing that was attached to the wall, and you lifted up the receiver that was attached to a cord, and you weren't going more than 4 feet away from that thing. Mm-hmm. So, and computers didn't come out until I was probably 6 or 7 years old for home use, or at least till my family could get a hold of it. So now we live where the information, spreading is almost instantaneous.
Right.
One thing I did a little ways back was, I distinguish between information, misinformation, and disinformation. Information is facts. Okay. Misinformation is non-facts, is false information shared in good faith. That means you thought it was true when you shared it. That's misinformation. Like so many of the memes we see on Facebook that we find out are faked or misleading, that is an example of misinformation. Disinformation is false ideas spread with a purpose in mind, either by, for example, possibly foreign governments or by a certain faction within a country to cause, division or whatever. But it's spread with a particular purpose in mind. So I think a lot of what we're dealing with is a lot of misinformation and disinformation people are believing is gospel truth.
Well, we have no education. We have no education in this any of this stuff.
Think about it.
It's brand new.
I know, exactly right. I just said that the other day. How many of us are taught to research, is this meme I'm sharing actually correct? Or is this post I'm sharing actually a fact? It's happened too quick to us,
right?
As human beings. So we aren't really educated on how to do that, how to find out if something is actually a fact or not.
Yeah. So as I was talking about with you earlier before we started recording, that there are people who are experiencing all of this rapid change.
We're all experiencing it.
We're all experiencing it, yeah. But some people are more open to the progress that we're making in society, right. And other people are seeing it as an attack on a sort of traditional values. And
exactly.
The reality is that there's going to be a kind of rebellion against that and a kind of confusion. And I think, here's a point I wanted to make that I've heard others make, but I hope that I think we can't make this clear enough in some ways, that the left creates the right and the right creates the left. So, for example, obviously, right, if there are people on the right who are being racist or bigoted in certain ways, the left is going to say, no, we're anti-racist, we're anti-homophobia. But then, in doing so, the left is, say, screaming at the right and saying, if somebody's just trying to become educated about these issues and trying to learn about how, okay, so you're telling me that there are certain things that are white privilege or whatever, right? And certain people on the extreme left might be saying, yes, you're radically racist and bigoted. What's that going to do? That's going to make people on the right become defensive. So
right.
And then they withdraw and they say, oh, these people on the left attacked me. So whether they go on Parler or whatever, and they connect with radical people on the right wing, and they say, these people are just, they're crazy. They're trying to say gender is just meaningless, and our value, our Christianity is, they're kind of, everything is relative, and abortion is okay. And they don't understand, in a lot of cases, these things. And so they're saying, okay, they demonize the left and say, okay, my club, my people now on the right, these are the people going to defend me, and they understand how I feel. They understand that I feel attacked for holding that views. So it's kind of a failure on the left of kind of creating an environment in which we can have respectful dialogue. Which is a tall order. I get it. Like, people on the left have a right to be angry about these issues, that have been going on for a long time, sort of patriarchy, white male supremacy kind of thing. But it's a really complicated thing.
Another big factor is the echo chamber factor, which, the social media, the algorithms, the artificial intelligences, really, it is an intelligence, and that's why it's called artificial intelligence. It's not conscious, but it's just trying to keep eyes on the screen. And there's two ways to do that. You either bounce back to somebody their own ideas, which they will get on and validate and read and say, yes, you are right. How can others not see this? Or it will show the oppositional ideas, which they will respond to by saying, no, this is not the way it is. So they were pointing out in The Social Dilemma, we're all in our own echo chambers. And when we come across the other, the one who is outside of our echo chamber, we're like, how can they believe that? Me and all of my friends are saying this same thing. And then here's this crazy person over there saying this entirely different thing. So that's another factor in that, is the echo chamber effect, and we all experience that. Eventually you get tired of certain opinions and you silence them, you unfriend them. Things get hostile after a certain point is made. And you unfriend them. So ultimately, we all end up in our own echo chamber, and we wonder how the other out there beyond the horizon of our ideas could think what they think and do what they do. Right.
You're right, Morgan. There are these echo chambers that exist, and it's completely damaging our society. And, this gets to a point that I've really has been on my mind, and that has come up in conversations I've had with people about how, once again, it goes back to, I think we talked about a little bit, how social life has changed today in such a way that it's kind of optional, right? That we used to depend.
As long as you have money.
You used to have to depend on other people for your survival, people in your family, in your tribe. But now we're getting to a point at which, if you don't like someone, if you don't agree with someone, you can pretty effectively cut them out of your life in most cases. You don't have to deal with those people. You could just stop calling them. You can stop seeing them. You can order your groceries online. You can order your things from Amazon.
Probably have them delivered by a drone.
Right. So there's no human contact necessary. Whereas for most of human history, that was not the case. We had to. So if you had a conflict within your tribe, within your family, you had to work it out. There's really no alternative other than, killing each other or being, excommunicated from the tribe, which is essentially the same thing as death, because you can't survive on your own in that kind of a situation. So we were forced to resolve and work through our issues. war existed, of course, as well between different tribes and stuff like that. But the point is that we are in a situation now where we are one huge tribe. And unfortunately, we're in this place where we think it's maybe, we don't have to work it out. We could just kill the other side. But the reality is that we're just destroying ourselves through all of this. Right. And that we really, we're coming to a point where we're so interconnected in our way of life, in our society, even though it seems like, I can just kind of shut people out and go on social media. No, we're going to need to work this out, or else we're not going to make it. I mean, it's to that level.
Do you mind if I quote Jesus?
Yeah, sure.
What you do to the least, you do unto me.
Right.
Once again, it's just pointing, there is no enemy. That's what it really means. There is no enemy.
Yeah.
Those are imaginings. And the truth is, human beings are not separate. Mm-hmm. We all share this planet. We breathe the same air. We are born, we live, we die, and we either form connections or not. And I think, as you're pointing out, what we're talking about is the connections between us and the recognition of those connections. So, that's what humanity is up against right now. And as you were talking about earlier, now you can just have everything delivered to you. You never have to see anybody. You can go to the gas pump and pay at the pump and not even go up to the window. You can do all this. But we still rely on other people for our survival. Every bit of food we eat is grown by someone else, somewhere else. And then someone drives that from where it's grown to the supermarkets where we get it. So we are still part of this web. Separation is impossible. It has always been impossible. It will always be. And the fact is, we're here together. Mm-hmm. And as you said, without each other, in nature, we die. And in a society that if you have enough money, you can pretend you're separate and isolated from everyone, then you just die inwardly.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're up against.
And in the spirit of Jesus, right? Loving our enemies, trying to invite others, people who are different or considered impure, to sit down at the table with us, no matter who we consider to be impure, I think is a kind of a necessary step that we're not going to be able to get past this unless we're able to really see the humanity in one another, that we're able to really figure out how to love each other and see, okay, this is difficult. This is difficult for people. It's difficult for people who are going through all of the, all the bull crap, and it's difficult for the people who are trying to make the adjustment of saying, man, maybe my way of life, does include things like white privilege, and being prejudiced against certain people groups that I never really considered before. And instead of just saying, feeling attacked because people are questioning that, to say, wait a second, maybe there's something that I need to reevaluate here. And to feel, we all need to feel kind of safe in that process. It's like, I don't know.
It's as we were talking about earlier too, most conservatives, or many of them, are from middle America, from the Southeast, and often from small towns. Okay. And what people are exposed to in a small town, and I live near many small towns where I live, what they're exposed to is a mostly homogenous, kind of white culture, and honestly kind of sheltered and delicate and kind of beautiful in a way as well. I like small towns. I happen to like it, but they're just exposed to less generally in terms of diversity and the varieties of human experience. So I think, as we're saying here, those things are more threatening in a way. They're newer, they're more novel. They haven't been as experienced in small town America. As we saw in the last election, and in most elections, usually the big population centers vote more liberal, and the coasts, which are generally big population centers. So, I think city people are exposed to more, and therefore their mind is kind of open to more. So, or not their mind is open to more, just they've experienced it already. It isn't new and possibly threatening. They've already experienced it.
Right. So
my point here is we need to show compassion to each other and their life experiences. As soon, I can speak to this. As you know, I'm part of an intentional community. I have been since 2012. And we realized at a certain point how essential nonviolent communication is. Okay? Anyone can go online and look up what nonviolent communication is. But basically, it's speaking to someone about a conflict or a problem and not using the language of blame.
Yep.
Okay. So in our community, it has proven essential. And, there's big learning curves to all of this. There's big learning curves to the technology, as you said, which our little mammalian brains aren't able to keep up with the rapid pace of the change of technology and information. And there's a learning curve to how to communicate to people in a way that doesn't offend, threaten, or make them feel attacked. Because the instant they feel attacked, the walls go up, communication is done. And I've seen this many times in our own community. I've been the attacker and I've been the attacked. I've been on both sides of that equation. So we've seen it and experienced it. So for us to come together and realize we're all Americans, okay? All of us living in the US, we're all Americans. For us to come together and realize we aren't separate, I think we do have to be careful about the language of blaming. We have to try to have compassion for the other side and not say, this is your fault. Because let's face it, there's been a lot of corrupt liberal politicians, Democrats, and Republicans.
Right.
And now we've allowed the whole political process to be bought out with Citizens United. Now corporate entities can give unlimited money to elections. So there's a lot of problems. And as you said in the very beginning, we can't just write off what we call the other side. We have to look at what some of their gripes are.
Right. It's like, so one of the things this brings to mind for me is the idea that we like to think that they're all the same on the right.
Right.
And that they're all the same on the left. They're all, they're all the same. Versus,
you're making a good point right here.
Versus the idea that these things really exist on a spectrum.
Right.
My dad is hardcore on the right, and yet he told me he likes the idea of universal health care. Right? So the truth is that these things are perpetuated by the news and the media, but the reality is that most people are a mix. They lie somewhere in between. They're
exactly
not
right.
hardcore left or right. And
exactly right.
And so once again, we just got to sit down at the table and sort of explore some of that.
Get to know
talk.
each other, human to human, instead of abstraction to abstraction.
Right.
Because politicians also use those abstractions. The idea of an us and them. There's us who think this way, there's them who think that way. But like you said, when you see it all as black and white, you miss all the grays, the shades of grays, and all the colors and all the spectrum that's in between. It's like for me, I try to form my own opinions about things. Admittedly, I lean towards the progressive side overall. But for gun rights, I think people should be allowed to own guns as long as they're not a felon or haven't been found to be dangerous. I think you should be able to own guns. And, once again, one of the big problems, and that's what you're pointing to right at this moment, is stereotyping. And you just take a whole group and you say, well, all conservatives are this way. All liberals are this way. All black people are this way. All white people are this way. stereotypes, prejudice.
Yep. Yeah. And so, right, exactly. It's always a mix. I mean, I'm thinking even, for myself and, me and you, we were talking about this earlier. Like, so I think I've heard people pointing out that one of the key characteristics of fascism is that it appeals to this idyllic past, that we're going to be able to return to a certain point in the past of history. And
leave it to Beaver.
And that will make things better again. That will fix the issue if we return to a point in history in which we really had things right. Make America great again. It's the epitome of the MAGA movement, right? So, so there's this idealization of this was the past and it was perfect and it was great and we need to return to that. And things will be solved.
When men were men, when women were women, women wore skirts, men wore pants.
Yep, exactly.
Everything was in its right place.
Yep. And so obviously that's problematic. I think that the past is not as perfect as a lot of people envision it. And yet I couldn't help but notice that even like you and I, right, we think about, well, I don't think we idealize the past in quite the same way, but
the further past, tribal living people.
Right. In the past, there were people who lived more in harmony with the earth, who weren't so kind of alienated from the earth and therefore kind of in the, involved in the process of its own destruction, kind of ruining our environment, ruining our the ability of the earth to sustain our own lives. And, the animals and plants that we depend on for our survival. So, there's like, we idealize the past too in certain ways. Like, what if we were more in touch with the earth? Or, I talked a lot about community, how, we used to depend on your tribe and your family for survival, that the intimate community was a part of who we are. So I idealize the past in those ways as well, even though I lean progressive as well. So once again, it goes back to the fact that there are truths on both sides. And as much
and I think we could even go one step further and say there aren't really sides. A side, kind of implies a distinct demarcation in the middle. And then everything falls to the left or the right of that. But once again, as you're saying, there's many people with many subtle, complex combinations of belief, ideas. And then this applies to skin tones and everything else. Is there actually a black person and a white person? Yes, there are some people whose skin pigmentation may be almost completely black. There are some people whose lack of skin pigmentation may make them white. But the truth is almost everybody is in between those two in a mix of, skin tones. And it's the same thing with beliefs. We're all sort of, it's kind of, I just think it's that kind of binary dualistic thinking that we're talking about.
Right. That's the danger.
That's the danger.
That, right. We're going to go into this black and white binary thing. But the thing is that we have to realize is I've learned this is an evolutionary characteristic that we are predisposed to seeing the other as a threat and identifying with our in-group. And the reality is, so much of our lives has to do with how we identify ourselves. And we identify as saying, okay, these are my people. And how do we know who our in-group is? The best way for us to identify who is our people that we belong to is by identifying who's not us, who's outside our people group, who are the other, who are the enemy. It's so that's one way to bring us together with a group intimately is by identifying an enemy. Sadly, it's a sad fact, but it's true. We say, we're all against those people. Now we rally together and band together and feel close together. And we have to be aware, and conservatives and liberals both have to be aware that dynamic is going on. And it's hardwired into our brains. but it's going to end up being the death of us all if we don't kind of understand that that is happening, you know.
Right. It seems to always come back to demonizing the other. Now, as you're pointing out, all of this is about survival. You know, in nature, knowing who is your tribe and who is other can be the difference between life and death.
Right.
If you go to that other group of people and say, hey, everybody, you're my tribe, they may chop you with axes. You just don't know what they're going to do.
They'll take advantage of you.
So, you know,
right. Potentially.
All of this evolved as nature, and all of this down to the atom, down to the subatomic, all of it, and up to galactic scale is nature, no matter how it turns out. But see, to me, it dawned on me a ways back. We humans, and I said this at a gathering, and it was controversial, but I said, we're motivated by two things: survival and pleasure. Everything we do is for survival or pleasure. Well, you could say, no, but look, we help people selflessly. That can be for pleasure because it's pleasurable to help people. And it's also conducive to survival to help others because they may help you back, or you feel connected to them. They feel connected to you.
Right.
So anyway, what I'm pointing to is everything we're seeing is nature. Even this, as you're pointing out, this tendency to identify the other, it's all nature. And our ability to distinguish and to just say, in the end, it's all nature. That is nature as well. But I think once we can recognize we're all sort of victims of this in a way. We all have these tendencies because they have been conducive to survival in the past. Tribalism, identifying the other. That's why we all have it. So that allows us to not make it personal. That allows us to see the other as, wait, they're just scared. And to see ourselves, wait, why am I so aggressive? I'm just scared.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that's heartbreaking about all of this is that, I don't know, maybe it's somehow necessary or somehow part of our development as collectively, right, as a species. But it's heartbreaking in the sense that I do feel strongly as though another way is possible, and that we don't have to live in this way. You know, the way we live our lives is really a mess, I would say. I mean, I want to be hopeful. I think I've heard a lot of people talk about how, and it's true, that life is actually better on the planet right now, if you can believe it or not, than it has been for most of human history in terms of quality of life. Not to say that there aren't people who are suffering and in poverty and those kind of things, but there are a greater percentage of people who are doing better today than they have in the past in human history. But it's just heartbreaking thinking like we can still do so much better, I believe, you know.
In how much of human history could you get a pizza delivered in 30 minutes?
Yeah.
And how much of human prehistory could you get a pizza delivered in 30 minutes?
Morgan, I'm about to order a pizza right now. You're making me hungry. You're making me hungry, man.
The snacky hours. No, but it is true. You know, I reflect on, look at our material abundance. You know, you and I were talking about Amazon, and now we can order things that if you went to any kind of store, you're not going to find it there. There's too many subtleties, and you can find exactly what you need.
Right.
So things are evolving and changing. Now, I feel like as humans, one thing we're up against is this fear that we have. And fear is on, you could call it both sides, but if we acknowledge it's on both sides, is it even two sides? No. We're all subject to this fear.
Right.
And then this fear leads to greed, okay, or violence. This fear leads to, I must accumulate enough until I'm safe, or it leads to, I must destroy that other one who is different than me to be safe.
Yeah.
So I just think it's crucial for us to recognize we're all in this fear mode, and the fear leads to greed, okay, and violence. So if we can deal with the fear, what was it Kennedy said? The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Yeah.
Or we have nothing to fear other than fear itself. That's impressive, or that's at least an interesting statement.
Yeah. Right. I mean, to me, this gets into the idea that, the ego, right? The voice in our minds that talks to us, that we identify with as this voice in our minds, the thinking mind. And
we call it me.
I think we've talked about this a little bit, about how the mind and the ego are not enemies. They're not things to be demonized either. I think a lot of, sometimes people might say, oh, we got to completely destroy the ego. We got to get rid of it.
The mind demonizes the mind. It's kind of funny, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but I think we talked about how, like, to use the analogy of driving a car, it's okay for the ego to be in the passenger seat or the back seat. What you don't want necessarily is the ego in the driver's seat.
Right.
I think, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I want to go on a limb and say that what we want in the driver's seat is love.
Mm-hmm.
We want love to be in the driver's seat. I think that's what drove Jesus, and most of the greatest spiritual teachers in human history.
Do you mind if I ask you a loaded question?
Mm-hmm.
What is love?
Love is who we are. I think we are loving awareness. To define love, I mean, we could go a lot of directions. I actually really like Eckhart Tolle's definition of love. Love is recognizing yourself in another.
Well, you could say that, and you could say the lack of belief in separation.
Yeah, to me, those are not really saying different things.
It's saying the same thing. What happens when love is in the driver's seat? We've always had a slightly different approach through the years, and we've always had many respectful conversations of it. To me, it's sometimes they call it the universe is in the driver's seat. And what I call me, I just recognize I'm part of this universe. This great cosmic happening, whatever it is, nature is in the driver's seat. It's saying the same thing. The universe is nature. Nature is the universe. And ultimately saying love is in the driver's seat is the same thing, because we're just saying we are part of this much bigger happening than a person, than a self. And we're a seamless part of it.
Right. Absolutely.
We aren't separate from it in any way, nor are we separate from any of the life on this planet, nor are we separate from the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we take in. There is no separation. It's an illusion, an impossible illusion as a living organism. Because if you are truly separated, even for a moment, if you're put in plastic wrap or a big vacuum seal bag, and if the air is pulled out of it, you're dead in very short order.
Yeah.
Separation's an illusion.
Well, I'm convicted that, and once again, this is easier said than done, but I think if you encounter a love like the love that was within Jesus or the Buddha or,
or Winston.
Not quite there yet, maybe, but I think it is within all of us. It's maybe sometimes buried underneath other things, but if you encounter a love like that, I think that you do realize the common humanity of us all, and realize that as misguided as we are, that I think if you really get in touch with that love, we won't be able to harm each other. We just won't be able to harm each other,
Yeah.
And we'll find a different way.
You don't see other human beings as the other. You don't see them as something fundamentally different or separate from you. You see them as we are, just another part of nature, just another part of the universe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I think you're right. When we come to that understanding, violence is impossible.
Yeah.
And that's why Jesus was saying, love even your enemies.
Yeah, because it's
love
yourself.
Your neighbor as yourself.
It's yourself. It's all oneself. From a certain point of view, it's all oneself. I think from Jesus's point of view, it's all oneself.
Yeah.
And so, we need to try to get to that point, despite our philosophical differences, to be fully committed to looking at one another and saying, beneath all of that, there is a person that has hopes and fears and desires, and at the end of the day, just wants to be loved.
Yeah.
So.
I thought lately, and I don't think I mentioned it to you yet, but I thought of creating a group called Progressives for Peace and Prosperity. And the goal of this group would be peace and prosperity for every human being. Not peace and prosperity for just Christians, not peace and prosperity for just capitalists, not peace and prosperity for just socialists, whatever the divisions are, the religions, the politics, everything else, but peace and prosperity for every human being. Because I feel like if people have peace and prosperity in their own lives, I don't care who they are, you're going to quit killing people. You're going to quit being out there using violence to try to change things. It'll be a whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
The place I find myself now, where I am in life, is I don't care what somebody's skin pigmentation is. Is it a little darker? Is it a little lighter? Is it a lot darker? Is it a lot lighter? I want to meet them as a human being. I want to meet them as their own person, who they are. I don't want to have assumptions about who and what they are before I get to know them. And even after I get to know them, I mean, I tell you all the time, I won't claim to understand who and what I am. And I feel like I never will understand that. And I'm okay with that. I just live in the mystery of it. And I'm okay with the mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It does make me think, though, and wonder about when you bring up the different skin color and all that and racism, and how I wonder, it's really I mean, so many of us, I think, are realizing that is sort of a core issue for us here in the United States, and how, what is really going on there? I mean, I think there's a few different things. It's like, on the one hand, there was this philosophy that still continues in many ways today, of feeling as though these people who look very different and come from a very different culture are not us, right? Yeah. Not us, and therefore, in some sense, not human. And then being confronted, what's happening is a gradual confrontation with the fact that, yes, these are actually people just like you and me. And therefore being confronted with the guilt of the horrors that have been committed in the past.
The cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
The guilt of having committed these atrocities in the past against people, denying that, saying, no, it didn't happen, minimizing it. It wasn't that bad. Trying to justify it. They really are different from us. All the games we play, and not realizing the sad truth of the matter. These are people just like us, and we did evil against them. And
for 400 years.
Yep.
And then for decades longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you.
And people
You're the one who pointed out to me the 400-year statistic of slavery. And my God, 20 generations of human beings because of the idea that that was okay or acceptable. 20 generations.
Right.
To have that done to them. Yeah.
And you know,
right.
and you could think about like the cognitive dissonance, you know, how hard it must be, right, for people who did those things, the ancestors of the people who did those things, to come to terms with how wrong that was, you know.
I want to find that LBJ quote on race. Listen to this. Are you ready for this quote?
I'm ready.
If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. That's from LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson. So you're right. Race is something we have to have a reckoning with. And just in admitting, and it would be nice if we could, as a race, just say, I'm sorry for what was inflicted on you and what has been inflicted and perpetrated. You know, I think once again, what we come back to is we're all human, regardless of the variations of our skin pigmentation, regardless of our beliefs. The very ability to have beliefs is a human trait. So seeing that common humanity is extremely important, and not buying into the ideas of separation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, this is where the whole idea of like incarnation and stuff really, to me, seems valuable. The fact that the idea that God can be experienced through other people, through humanity, through creation, and realizing that it's not just a few people who are children of God, or divine, or sacred, or worthy of reverence. It's all of us. It's all of us. And some of us are lost, you know, but that we are still children of God, and that under no circumstances should we really resort to violence and killing and that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, but violence is always an expression of ignorance. Do you remember the Buddha's quote? I think it's from the Dhammapada, but the essence of it is, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed.
Right, exactly.
Yep. You know, yeah, I think that's what we come back to, and it's always a good message. It's the same message Jesus was saying. It's the same message said by many through the eons.
Right. Oh, man. Well, I feel like we can go on forever. And yeah, we can keep debating and all this stuff. And I don't know if we solved...
master debating.
I don't know if we solved anything, but it's good to talk with you, man. It's been
yes, sir.
It's been interesting. And
yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing, continuing conversation.
Let me just say one thing. I'm extremely optimistic. Extremely. I told this to a person the other day. I was having a dermatologist appointment, and I was telling my dermatologist, I was saying, I am extremely optimistic. And she was like, really? Do you realize how few people feel that way right now? And so it was nice, you know, getting to be that little ray of sunshine.
So what's behind the optimism?
I see progress happening in spite of the setbacks. We have a Black female vice president for the first time ever. Georgia sent a Black senator to the Senate for the first time ever. I see progress through all of the pain, all of the suffering, I see the movement of progress.
That is true. It's a good point. It's like, I think, I heard some people, kind of I can't remember where it was exactly, but sort of thanking, Trump, because now, I forget, I think the House or the Senate was like all of this diversity. It's a more diverse kind of population of people within our Congress now than ever before.
Right.
And why? Like, people are more involved in politics now than ever before. Like, more people voted in the past election than have voted ever. So it's like, it's right. It's like, as much as we don't want these bad things to happen, I think part of the reality is that they have a relationship together. It's like the bad, and the good are...
The setbacks cause a progress.
Yeah.
The pulling the rubber band back causes the rubber band to shoot forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, exactly. There's a dynamic going on in which, we respond to the negative things by becoming stronger and more resilient, and the challenges that show up in our lives often serve to help us to grow and deepen as human beings. So I think I think that's a good note to end on, that we can be hopeful that this is happening on a collective level, that this is actually, it's funny, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, I came across
Oh God, that was such a good
Twitter, the sword,
with the sword.
the cone and the sword.
And you temper it, and you shove it into the coal.
Yeah, he's saying we will persevere through this. It's a sword. Our democracy is a sword. You have to temper it, and the more it gets pounded.
For anybody who hasn't seen it, look up Schwarzenegger, Capital. Well, I don't know. It'll be Capital Attack or something. But he put out a video. It's wonderful, amazing. And it's humorous and just, about tear inciting all at the same time. Yeah, right. Yeah, he's kind of an epic guy in some ways. I love him. Yeah. I love him. He's got a sense of humor. He's intelligent. And the guy was a bodybuilder. I mean, that was his thing, but he's a brilliant guy. Right. He's a brilliant guy. He really is,
Yeah, man. Well,
you should have him on your show.
I'll work on that. Yeah.
He's like, Winston, let me tell you, you are correct.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on here, Morgan. I think we probably out of time for tonight.
I know. We need to shut up at some point.
Yep.
Shut all this blabbing up.
Yep. So, any final thoughts before we call it? Anything you're working on lately that you might want to...
Love the people of the world. Oh, I'm making a game. It's a board game. And I think about how revolutionary board games are now. It's an RPG, role-playing game. But to bring people together around a table, it's almost revolutionary, the idea of it. To sit down as human beings without phones, without the electronic distractions, and play a game together.
Amen.
So anyway, my game's called Multidimensional Dungeons. If you type that in and put a .com on the end of it, it'll take you to the website. And I'm always working on stuff. I got a new album coming out. I got a new book called Having Nervous Breakdowns for Fun and for Profit. I'm working on that one. There's just all kinds of stuff in the works. MorganCaraway.com too.
Okay.
Is where people can look up my shit. Cool. I know nobody cares, and that's fine.
Well, maybe not. But yeah, maybe we'll see. You never know. Well, thanks, Morgan, for being on here. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Sir. And we got a lot of good stuff coming, so stay tuned.